Today on First Name Basis, we have Wole Ogunwale. Thank you so much for joining us today, Wole.
Thank you for having me. My name is Wole. As you know, I am a project program manager and also project manager. Um, Most recently, I worked in Sanofi, but the span of my career has been with regards to digital transformation projects. I'm particularly enthusiastic about Industry 4.0 or Industry 5.0 initiatives. These help manufacturers to strategically uh, become more efficient and, of course, to move with the times, with regards to all of these innovations and technological advancements that we're seeing now. So it is it's always a privilege to be at the driver's seat in these initiatives.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've done some incredible work. I had a chance to speak before. Most recently, been working in the pharmaceutical industry. What are some, kind of interesting projects or components that you've seen with your background in Industry 4.0, and really how that's been shaping the pharmaceutical industry?
Yes, I have to, and forgive me for not uh, also mentioning that the industries in which I have worked. So yes, aside the pharmaceutical industry, I've worked in biotechnology, but also a huge chunk of my experience has been in the food industry. Now, one thing these industries all have in common is they all operate in what is called GXP environments or GMP environment, depends on who you ask. Um, GXP environments include environments in the laboratory and also on the shop floor in manufacturing. And in my experience, um, basically business leaders are always looking to optimize not only profitability but also the employee experience and also their impact in the environment, which are some of the benefits of Industry 4.0. Now, over the past five years, uh, there has been investments which has been sped up more recently by artificial intelligence. First, it was the massive need to gather, clean up, and warehouse data for these organizations. And now organizations are making sense of these data, um, you know, bringing these data, leveraging analytics basically to see what they say about current business processes, what they say about business spending, etc. And then leverage machine learning and artificial intelligence to not only improve their outcomes, but to also predict possibilities in the future. And also, very important again, is the experience of their employees. Take uh, Senior leaders are looking to implement initiatives that make life easier for their employees, make employees enjoy working with them, and to also help them to focus on other areas of their jobs that can bring out the best of their talents.
Yeah.
So that is a brief synopsis of what is going on in Industry 4.0.
Fantastic. And I know that you mentioned artificial intelligence already. We're hearing that quite a lot these days, and as a buzzword, I think that it's something which is becoming a part of everyone's life,
Yes.
like it or not, especially in the manufacturing side. You also mentioned Industry 4.0 and Industry 5.0. What is the
Yes.
difference between those, and how do we define those?
Yes, so I haven't done a lot of work in Industry 5.0. This is something that I am starting to learn about. So I would not like to spend so much time on it. However, what I understand on the surface is that it puts humans in the driver's seat, back in the driver's seat of artificial intelligence deployments. Right now, artificial intelligence dictates how they are being applied, and we are uh, creating policies because these are relatively new technologies.
Of course.
Humans are still trying to figure out responsible ways to apply these technologies. They're still trying to set the guardrails um, in the implementation of artificial intelligence. So guardrails with respect to how the data is being used by um, models that are being deployed, the decisions that are being made, um, etc. Right. However, when all of these are well understood, then we can advance properly into Industry 5.0, which puts humans in um, right spaces of control. Now we know how to use or how to apply AI and machine learning. So now we get to dictate exactly how it is being applied with proper regulation, proper policies, etc. So I would say that's the difference. Really, is it's control.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, you've done more work in Industry 4.0, which is still, kind of an emerging industry for a lot of manufacturing companies, especially those kind of undergoing that digital transformation now. Some are trying to understand that digital transformation and really trying to understand where they fit within it and how it fits within their organizations more specifically.
Yes.
Um, you mentioned Industry 5.0, which I think is fascinating,
Hmm.
giving the power back to humans in a sense.
Yeah.
Um, how far away are we, given your experience from Industry 4.0, to making that step forward?
So I would say one huge area of growth in artificial intelligence is agentic technology, which is something that I'm also working on the side as a passion project. I have a little startup. Allow me to plug it in.
Go
It's called
ahead. No, plug away.
yeah,
Love it.
it's called Emrys. I'm working with a close friend of mine, and he is more of the engineer, and I am sort of providing strategic um, and network you know uh, leverage to the startup. So anyways, but agentic AI technology is basically technology that you install into your organization or your workstation to help you to become more productive. It could be for a specific use case or in a general use case. I know that OpenAI released their own, which is the most popular agentic technology right now, which is called Operator. And what Operator does, which is similar to what we do, is um, it can process speech to text and also just take text, natural language inputs to perform everyday mundane tasks, right? So you get to tell it what to do, go to a specific folder, extract certain numbers, create a presentation, send that presentation as an email to my CFO, et cetera, right? So um, this, I would say, is a bridge between Industry 4.0 to Industry 5.0 because you are in control of what AI does for you. You have set the guardrails, you have defined what it is for it to operate responsibly. And then now you're telling it, okay, do this for me, and it does it for you.
Hmm.
Maximizes your efficiency and your productivity.
Right.
Um, Industry 4.0 as it is now um, is, um, and allow me to start with something. So there is what is called the Smart Industry Readiness Index, which is an index created by the Economic Development Council in order to in order for organizations to assess themselves and also allow accredited um, organizations, so we can call them, consulting companies, to come onto their organization, perform audits and assessments, and see the state of one, their business processes, two, the current technologies that they use, and three, the organization in itself. See what those current states are, benchmark these states, and then provide a gap analysis of where they are and where they need to be. And with this, they're able to strategically plan for a reorganization, collection of legacy and ongoing operational data, the processing of these data, and then the right AI deployments to be built on, you know, say Internet of Things, or on uh, what else? What else? What else? On, I'm running out of words here, but
Oh, it's gonna take your
yeah,
time.
yeah. But essentially, to leverage the Internet of Things and data analytics in order to make decisions, basically. So, um, Industry 4.0 is putting a lot of these things together and then giving it to AI. Industry 5.0 is now you have set the rules, the regulations on how AI should operate, and now you're basically dictating
Yeah.
how it should be done. So,
Oh,
does
that's
that answer
fascinating.
your question?
Yeah, I think so. A very high profile component to it. I think, one thing that we're finding, speaking to different manufacturing companies,
Mhm,
and I think that we would probably fit in very well with your description of basically a third party
mhm,
company that would come in and help do that kind of digital assessment
mhm.
and really determine the right use cases. How important is it for a company, whether it's an SME or a global organization, to really find those use cases and spend the time on that, and really how they decide what's the best use case for really any digital transformation 4.0 or soon moving into 5.0, and focus it on you know best ROI and value.
Yes. So this is where cooperation is needed, or alignment is needed, um, between organizational goals and strategies, the functional leaders, and then the um, you know the whoever the third party is that you're bringing on board. Now, the organization has specific goals or targets um, they would like to reach in the next 3 or 5 years. Um, and now they have strategies with which, well, they have current strategies with which they intend to get there. However, their processes or the organization in itself in that company may not align with those strategies, and these things are not they are not obvious at first. However, it requires transparency to these third parties, to be on the same table with them, um, you know, for you to allow them to come on board to assess the business processes, um, for you to be transparent to your current and future states. And then these consulting firms will be able to provide their assessment of what the current gaps are. Um, the functional leaders are the subject matter experts. So, for example, in manufacturing, we have functional leaders in um, packaging, in quality assurance, in even supply chain, right? The logistics aspect of sourcing ingredients, and then making them available for production, right? So we have functional leaders in all of these areas. They fully understand the technicalities of what they do on a day-to-day basis and the processes that are in place. So we need them to now to come and say, well, according to so and so goals that have been set, with the current these are the current process these are the processes we have in place right now to get to so and so goals. However, we believe that if we have certain modules of SAP deployed, it will help us to get there faster. Now, the third party will then say, okay, these are the current capabilities of SAPs, but assessing your current processes, we don't think these processes align with SAP's current capabilities, right? Now, we have alternative ERP solutions that could be leveraged that will fit perfectly with your organization. But we don't advise that you jump into implementing these SAP modules. Now, you will, whoever the organization is, will follow these recommendations, implement these recommendations, however, strategically, right? So we're talking about change management. Uh, you start first with a pilot in a small business unit or in a small in one location, see how it works with the changes in business processes, upskill the talent that is currently in those locations, and then provide the necessary support for them to deal with the change and then measure the outcomes of that change. If these outcomes appear to be scalable, then you you know start to scale them you start to scale them up to other locations, and then you measure those outcomes before it becomes a global deployment, etc. Right? And if it does not work out in the pilot deployment, you look at what the lessons learned are, how can it be improved, and then again you reiterate until you get to an ideal state, and then
Yeah.
again you scale it up from there. So
Yeah, and that's fascinating. I think it helps people really understand, helps organizations understand
yeah,
how to really tackle this.
yeah,
At times it can feel like you're swallowing an elephant
hmm,
versus really taking on projects that make sense and you see that ROI as
yeah,
you're describing, and then you can
exactly,
roll it out more scalably. And I think that's incredible. One thing you did mention was SAP.
yes,
In your experience, in your opinion, how does digital transformation align with SAP, and how can you integrate those to really see that value driven, especially those organizations that are just now, bringing SAP on, or they've had, legacy processes, whatever it might be. How do you kind of merge those to make something that really works and automates and optimizes?
yes. So I have to make a clear distinction between business transformation and digital transformation. Now, business transformation means you have current processes ongoing. You may not necessarily have technologies that help to augment those processes. Um, And so you go in the market and you find the right solution to automate or to digitize those processes. So you're moving from one state of business to another state, which involves digital transformation, which involves digital technology. Now, digital transformation is you're currently, to an extent, using some form of digital technology in your business process or in your day-to-day operational processes, and now you think it can be more efficient, you think there are better solutions out there, or you think there's something out there in the market that makes life easier, and then you're you're transitioning from this solution to another solution, right? So that's one difference. um, but I feel like I lost your question. Can you repeat that
Oh,
question?
SAP and digital
Yeah.
transformation.
So now where SAP comes now is SAP basically is a suite of models that helps you to digitize your business processes across different functions, right? So there are quality modules, there are supply chain modules, there are production modules, etc. Um, what it does now is that it works with um, you know, assuming you have a talented and upskilled workforce, um, they their adoption of SAP into their processes would help to optimize bottom lines for the organization, right? So it'll help the organization to track how raw material passes through from end to end, from sourcing to packaging to even sales to distribution, right? How um, how Tim Hortons coffee, for example, from sourcing the coffee from Ethiopia or wherever it's been sourced to when it's packaged into the the packaging, right, into the customer facing brand, right? So um, all of the materials, the packaging material, the batch records, the uh, the cost per unit, etc. Everything, um, as long as the people on the shop floor are aligned and they're adopting SAP, and there is no leakage in the adoption. Um, Leakage, as per someone, well, we have agreed that we're going to be using SAP to track all batch records, all production records, all inventory records. Everything should pass through SAP, but then some people are just leaving it out of the end-to-end processes, right? So that could be a source of leakage. So there should be frameworks or people in place to ensure that the adoption is being adhered to, right? So assuming full adoption, there is visibility to functional leaders as to what the end-to-end bottom lines are and what can be improved, better sourcing or better operational processes, etc. Right? So yes, the term I was trying to remember was digital twins, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So um, this brings me to digital twins, right? Because now it's one thing for you to have SAP to fully track your business, your end-to-end business processes. But it's another thing for you to also have digital twins in place for you to optimize um, some operational conditions, right? With the assumption that you have proper tracking of data and the right analytics. Again, the infrastructure of that is a separate conversation. But assuming we have all of these in place, digital twins allows you to uh, create a mirror of your shop floor state and then make some simulations. Okay, if I change X and Y, um, what will be the outcome without actually making that change on the operational floor? It's like creating a math equation and then changing variables without actually changing those variables in real life. So, in a way, there's a predictive nature to digital twins. However, it's not fully predictive. It's only using data that it currently has to make these uh, suggestions. But that was a very wordy response, so I'm going to stop here.
No, it's great. Yeah, no, it's great. I think there's a lot to unpack
Yeah.
from that explanation,
Hmm.
and I think when you get into the realm of digital twins, SAP, digital transformation, um, a lot of companies just don't know where to start. Obviously, a lot of them
Yeah.
have been using SAP, they're familiar with that. And it becomes a little complicated, I think, for some. For the
Yes.
larger organizations, they have the resources for that. The smaller ones, maybe not so much.
Yes.
And that's why I think the education is really important for that to kind of help close that bridge, help them understand where to start and who to speak to about that.
Hmm.
Helping them close those gaps as well. I think that's very fascinating, and I think one thing that always comes up, even in this conversation, is what's the role that AI plays into this? And one question that we've asked as well is, what is enough data? How do
Hmm.
you collect that data? What is clean data? How do people know how to train AI so that's optimal? And where does that fit into digital transformation, especially given the complexities of SAP integration and everything else, depending on the size
Hmm.
and legacies of the organization?
Yes. Um, I'm really, really happy that I got to remember, um, the phrase digital twin, uh, because it conveniently helps us to transition into machine learning and AI. Mind you, SAP is only a digital solution, right? It's just a way of digitizing existing business processes and then to be able to track it. So you're able to assign a business process owner to specific business processes like source to packaging, right? This person knows the chain of events, the SOPs, standard operational procedures for these events, where these SOPs can be found, who should be assigned to it, what the roles should be, etc., etc. And all of that is codified into SAP. And then, depending on the module, it trickles down to specific owners of specific steps in business processes. So, again, SAP is only a digital solution. used to digitize business processes. Now, digital twin, on the other hand, assuming the organization has well understood what their processes are, and they have been able to achieve a harmonized relationship between their business processes and the digital implementation, right? And all of this is going fine. The next step would be to, um, okay, so let me backtrack a little bit. So
Yeah,
there's the
take your time.
processes, there's a digital solution. Now, in manufacturing organizations, they would have actual equipment on the shop floor. Now, let's restrict this conversation to the confines of a manufacturing facility where things are being, ingredients are being prepared and they're being produced or um, refined into more value added products. And then the value added product is derived and then packaged. Um, there are equipments or machines that do this for organizations, and then there are people, right? Now, this brings me to the Internet of Things, right? So these equipments would have sensors naturally, right? So you have a Siemens packaging machine, or you have a it could be it could be any it could be a Panasonic whatever machine that does whatever it does, processes and ingredients. The idea is that these equipments will have sensors within them that collect production data. It could be temperature, it could be viscosity, it could be yield, it could be throughput. I mean, well, all of that data can be used to calculate throughput, anyways. Um, but it could be anything, right? All of these equipments will have data that they collect. Now, the Internet of Things allows for uh, a sort of remote tracking of these data. But that is only made possible by collecting the right data, making sure that the data is clean. To your question, what is clean data? Clean data is basically data specific to a parameter that has been collected without the possibility of noise um, influencing one, the data collection, and two, the storage of that data. Um, I wouldn't like to get too technical about that. However, the main idea is the data is collected, stored on, let's say, cloud infrastructure, let's say a Snowflake database that allows for analytics. These analytics then help to build an Internet of Things, right? So you're able to now have access to a dashboard that provides you with all of these information that you can access on a tablet as a production manager, right? And then you can see multiple instruments within that tablet. You can also see logs of who used what machine, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the Internet of Things, right? To take this a bit further, we now have digital twins, right? Digital twins now still leverages the data that has been collected and stored on the cloud. However, there are 3D models that have been constructed of the machines and of the business processes. And these 3D models um, and the processes have been modeled on the software side using machine learning, right? So um, you've used certain formulas, mathematical formulas,
Yeah.
or certain conditions to say if there is X, then Y, or if X plus Y, then Z. You understand? So we have these equations that the subject matter experts understand, and they have been translated into code and used to train machine learning models, which then power the digital twins. So now you can get to change these parameters and say, well, okay, what if we have times two of the ingredients, but then we lower the temperature and then we do this, we change that. What will be the outcome? Is this the optimal outcome? Is this good for the business? Is this good on the long term for our strategy, et cetera, et cetera? So you're able to, use data that has been collected over time to inform decision making, right? A huge problem is that legacy data sometimes is not clean because in the past, a lot of these processes were not digitized um, um, the way or as ideal as they should be, or they just were not collected, right? I would say, for example, in pharma, a huge amount of effort is being put into paperless paperless production records or paperless batch records. Traditionally, uh, you know, a QA technician will go on the floor with a paper, and collect data, make verifications, and then collect signature from so person, collect signature from this, and they themselves will sign, and then the QA manager will sign. The amount of time it takes to do that alone consumes, you know, a lot of the business resources. But with electronic batch records, um, there are proper audit trails just from you logging into your device or from you just confirming certain prompts on your electronic batch record collecting device that eliminates all of the bureaucratic delays that would be involved if they were being collected in person. However, because in the past they were collected on paper, now you have to deal with having to transcribe these paper. Some of these transcriptions will come with error. Some of these are transcribed by people that don't even understand the purpose of the data that is being transcribed. Now, this will introduce noise into the data, and you would have to, for example, clean and transform the data for it to be merged into data that is currently being collected, right? But anyways, that's an explanation of digital twins, collection of data, and how how machine learning comes into digital twins. Now, AI, um, more recently, um, industries are starting to, you know, find AI use cases. Um, I know that a lot of effort has been put into using generative AI on the operational floor. Um, so generative AI with regards to the SOPs that I referred to that are being codified into SAP for employees on the shop floor to refer to as they work. Right now, these SOPs can be um, put into AI use cases to help experts on the production floor to work faster, right? So it could be a headset that the operator can say, how do I ingest so and so molecule for so and so process, and then you know, generative AI will do its thing and describe processes to the operator step by step, making life easier. He doesn't have to go to one office, get the SOP, and then read it and then do this. And, everything is generated and then text to speech in real time, makes work faster, right? We also have Internet of Things, which will help functional leaders to remotely track what is going on the Gemba. So Gemba means the place, right? You put on a VR headset, it's hooked up to cameras on operation floor. You have dashboards that show you machine performances, etc., etc. You're able to make real life decisions just by looking at your VR headset. It saves on travel costs. It saves on, um, you know, what's it called now?
Enhances sustainability.
Emissions from
Yeah,
traveling. Some of these
sustainability.
people have to travel from the USA to Singapore or to France in order to make these decisions. With your headset, you don't have to do all of that, right? Um, so anyway, so that's where the Internet of Things and then AI and digital twins start to work hand in hand. But you don't get any results without proper data collection in your business transformation phase in the first place.
So you mentioned obviously clean data, digital twins, AI. Where does kind of the data collection process, go from being, a legacy process to a modern process, and specifically the hardware?
Hmm.
I guess what I'm thinking are, production line data sensors and how that could integrate with exactly what you're describing to collect that clean data in real time, drive future and current decisions, optimize, reduce costs and waste, and really go from that era of walking around with a clipboard, signing off on things, transcribing that data, probably storing it somewhere on facility to somewhere in the cloud.
Hmm.
And how does that all kind of, what's the connective tissue for that? Really, is that the sensors, or is that just the way that we kind of go about doing things?
Um, the connective tissue. I may need you to clarify that. So, are you talking about the human aspect of it, or are you talking about the technology, the digital technology aspect of things that sort of connects everything?
Yeah, I think going from a paper clipboard
Hmm.
approach, which a
Yeah.
lot of manufacturers, especially North
Yeah.
America, are still doing,
Hmm.
to really understanding that automation side,
Yeah.
and bringing in kind of what's that futuristic approach,
Yeah.
right? Where you do have sensors, you do have machine learning and AI,
Hmm.
understanding that and translating that to a tablet or kind of a
Yeah.
central kind of graphical interface in real time, where
Yeah.
people now don't have to walk the floor as much as they did because they have a digital twin providing
Hmm.
that information live,
Hmm.
or they already are on site on the floor, and now they're just kind of reviewing the information from their tablet as they
Hmm.
kind of do a walk down, and then that gets
So yeah.
digitally transcribed into the cloud in a way.
So how to connect the current state for some industries to the future state, which is basically where we are, where we have Industry 4.0. I would say it'll be decision making. I would say from my experience in pharma and biotech, a lot of the hesitation comes from one, you know, is this investment really worth it? Will it be successful? Because there are many scary stories out there. Um, you know, I was recently reading about Spar, which is a Dutch food company that implemented SO. They spent $100 million into their SAP implementation, but it failed, right? So there's a lot of apprehension as to investing into these things, which, by the way, will take a lot of time. The shortest amount of time I've seen so far is about 5 years to, get operationalized. So spend a lot of money and time into doing these, and then, you know, it's not successful, right? And then there's the cybersecurity aspect of things, right? Now, with the right business case, business leaders are able to see that this is a no-brainer and it's only a plus for their business. And in fact, holding on to current systems will only hold them back because the companies that are, you know, returning record profits are digitally transforming at an alarming rate. So it's a no-brainer. They just need the right business case, which again starts with the SIRI, which I described, the Smart Industry Readiness Index, and then the gap analysis that comes with it. Um, and then there's a digital aspect or the technology aspect, which predominantly is cloud, AI, and machine learning, basically. So those two, cloud, AI, and machine learning. Um, and what I find is that the most successful industries in their digital transformation approach, they have dedicated organizations within the larger organization that handle digital infrastructure. right? So they have teams that determine their cloud strategy because there is a method to cloud technology itself. You know, you have to make sure that whatever implementation you're doing, it's interoperable, which means you can move from AWS to Azure to GCP to Oracle, depending on what makes business sense. Strategies as to where data will be stored, where it will be archived, and the cadence to which data will be accessed, because you know you're moving from on-prem to cloud, which on paper may look cheap, but when you actually need to use that data, the cost starts to accumulate. So again, you need um, cloud architects or cloud decision makers to carefully plan out the strategy for that as well. And it has to align with the company's strategic objectives, right? So the most successful organizations have functional leaders, business leaders, and digital leaders on the same table. They have one North Star, and then they break down that North Stars into different strategic pillars, right? We have the process pillar, we have the technology pillar, we have the organizational pillar, and then it is further broken down into a plan, an implementation plan, right? This is how we intend to break down the strategy, and um, this is how we intend to implement the strategy. And then, um, you know, um, next, you would have people like myself who are program leaders. Um, you know what these strategic goals are. Um, you then work with functional leaders to define an acceptance criteria. Um, and then you work with the project managers and other subject matter experts to make sure that the plan is being followed. And whatever support they need to make sure these plans are successful is provided to them, right? So um, I'm not sure if rather that answers your question, but I'm
Yeah.
happy to.
No, I think that that's
Yeah.
some incredible insight again. I think that you mentioned a really interesting point,
Yeah.
where it's having the knowledge and the skills people to understand that cloud migration.
Mhm.
And is that something that companies should look to internally? I think this is a two-part question. Is that something that companies should look to do internally or externally? And furthermore, we have companies, there's a lot of companies out there who say, well, we have an IT team.
Mhm.
Are those the same people? And if not, what separates that?
It's a no-brainer. It has to be done externally first. You have to find people who have worked across multiple industries, who have skin in the game, who have hopefully made mistakes in the past and have learned from them, to tell you, these are lessons that have been learned from deployments in other organizations. These are strategies that were implemented, and this is what we recommend for you to do. This is the current state of your IT department. These are their current capabilities, but here's how we can upskill them to meet the demands of your strategic goals, right? Um, and again, that all ties into change management, right? So, um, you know the change, you know what needs to go into the change, and then you assess the people and their skill set. It doesn't mean they're not talented. It doesn't mean they're incompetent, but we can always learn, right? So these gaps in learning have to be identified by someone from the outside, and then um, organizations can move forward from there.
Yeah. And I think that's incredible. And just understanding, nobody understands their business more than the people running that business.
Yes.
And I think having that third party perspective, especially with that digital lens,
Mhm.
sounds like an integral part of that.
Mhm.
And establishing those cadences, um, and really getting involved and hands on and saying, look, this is kind of not using the word break things, but this is kind of how we would break things and then move them back together in order to
Mhm.
see that change, which is, as you're saying, critical, for those
Hmm.
companies that are really thriving right now, are the ones that have already done that kind of digital transformation.
Hmm.
I think what I'm curious about myself is looking at, the scope of SMEs in Canada and the United
Hmm.
States. And I think we understand that a lot of the global companies have the resources to do this type of digital transformation. They just do it in their own kind of way and then determine later on if it was a success or not.
Hmm.
Other than, you know, bringing in a third party, doing that with an SME, I guess my question is like how would an SME in Canada or the United States, just in the manufacturing industry as a whole,
Yeah.
really kind of approach that? And what kind of timeline should they give themselves for doing the assessment and then actually rolling out that digital transformation to really see that ROI?
That is a great question because, global companies can afford to experiment. They can afford to say, you know, whatever you're bringing to them, we will try it in we will try a pilot in this location, see if it works, and then we start to spread it out little by little and work on the kinks along the way. However, SMEs, in addition to limited financial resources, they perhaps do not have, a lot of ground for experimentation, right? So, you know, in fact, in some cases, it has to be a get it right first time, approach, right? So, my objective opinion would be for, uh, especially if it has to do with, um, you know, machine learning, AI deployments, or even just normal digital deployments, to be for them to be able to look at similar use cases, um, learn from these similar use cases if possible, visit um, organizations that have successfully done what is being planned to be done, learn from what they've done before implementing in their organization. Because when they make those learnings, they're more open to changing processes, and then conducting assessments as to what the impact of these changes would be uh, on their organization before, uh, you know, fully committing to these changes. Um, yeah, I'll keep it at that.
Yeah, no, I think that kind of helps summarize it a little bit.
Yeah,
And every company is unique;
yeah,
they're all different. And I think understanding those timelines will be, at the end of the day, their decision,
yes,
right? After
exactly.
taking that assessment and really understanding next steps in order to do that rollout. I think that you've also raised a really good point as well, especially that we're finding speaking to some of these companies, is they do acknowledge that they have limited resources and they
Hmm.
don't want to shut down lines too much. They don't want to pull people away because obviously that affects their entire operations. What would you say to those types of companies who obviously do have limited resources and really want to get it right the first time,
Hmm.
without minimizing too much downtime within their daily operations, or 1 hour a week, or what's the best way for them to really get involved in that?
Yes, I would say having a dedicated team is really important. So, you have, I mean, this is with the assumption that the company has a process that works and gives them results, in their current state, and they're only trying to improve. So, if there is a process that works, the approach would be to, you know, first identify how they would like to get to their future state, um, start to work on reaching the future state, but not to abandon their current state. Um, it may mean more commitment from their current resources, um, which is why uh, good leadership is really important. Someone who is able to motivate the people on ground, let them understand the sacrifices that need to be done in order to um, find a path to a better, more profitable organization, and then put in that work. But I wouldn't recommend to abandon the current state completely. To an extent, the current state has to, well, to an extent, the future state can be, um, what's the word now? The To an extent, the future state can be, I don't want to say experimented, but let's say, for example, you have 50 customers in your current state. You don't want to move on the full 50 customers to your new way of working, right? It has to be a measured approach in some
Incremental.
sort, incremental, right? Maybe you start with platforming two really loyal customers that you have explained what is about to happen to, right? And then you start from them, you measure the outcomes, you scale to 10 customers, you measure the outcomes, and then, you know, eventually you get to 50 out of 50 customers on your new um, current state, right? But in a way, it's sort of analogous to what large organizations do rather, in the sense that you are still piloting your new initiative in some sort. Um, it's just not at the scale at which large organizations do it. So again, it will still be a measured approach, um, only that it has to be done right the first time. So
Yeah.
consistent tracking of performance, consistent um, or agile iterations of these implementations will get them to where they need to be.
No, I think that's a fantastic answer and kind of an overview to help
Yeah.
kind of people get a framework of what that might look like.
Hmm.
We understand there's always fear to change.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Absolutely.
a lot of fear
Old
behind
old
this as
habits
well.
die hard. So yeah.
Yes, exactly. And at the end of the day, having that in a kind of controlled environment in a controlled
Hmm.
way, I think creates that assurance as
Yes.
well. And I think people are always looking for ways to de-risk projects.
Hmm.
Are there any kind of ways outside of what you've mentioned to look at really de-risking those transformations?
Yes. It's again, so cooperation and motivation on the shop floor is very important. So having a dedicated team, especially for SMEs, is most important. Um, so it's um, a good place to start with would be to find really motivated individuals that actually are passionate about embracing this new way of working. Um, and then modifying their roles in the company. You can call them um, an AI transformation lead, for example, right? So you have them uh, not only doing their day to day, but also dedicated to uh, ensuring the success of the current transformation initiative. And then through them, they get to bring on board other people that will contribute to the success of that initiative. Um, in terms of risk assessment and risk management, that is where people like myself, program managers or project managers, depending on the scale and number of initiatives that are being worked on at the same time, comes in, right? So our expertise in understanding the business process. Again, one thing I seem to have left out again is harmonizing the business processes, right? So uh, these processes have to be standardized. You need to have standards in place and people that ensure that these standards are being followed at the shop floor level, right? Because if you plan to embrace digital technology and on the high level, everyone is aligned. But on the shop floor, people are still working. Again, old habits die hard, right? So if on the shop floor, people are still doing things, bringing on, paper clips to, there's basically data leakage, right? You're not getting the maximum potential that you should be getting. In fact, you may be getting negative results, and you may be fooled into thinking uh, your efforts are in vain, where it's only misalignment on the shop floor. So, apart from having transformation leadership, um, standards have to be set that allow, or that mandates, or that set guidelines for people on the shop floor to actually embrace the use of technology, right? So that removes the risk of not adequately measuring success, right? And then there are other risks that would have to do with technicalities, right? Risk of, again, the technology not matching. um, Maybe you're implementing something that is more general but is not tailored specific to your industry or to the kind of products that you make, or to the end-to-end flow. So there's that risk, which is again why you would need third parties to come to audit your facility and to again provide industry best practices to you. um, Another way to de-risk, um, I don't know, that's a very general question. How, yeah.
How about, well, one
Yeah.
thing we're finding as well is access to government initiatives and
Okay.
programs,
Yes.
funding for de-risk,
Hmm.
which I think is unique per country,
Yeah.
obviously, as well. But we have seen some major benefits for some of our clients as well, who have
Hmm.
been able to de-risk outside of the technical approaches as well, and just
Yeah.
understanding that we're very lucky, at least within Canada, to operate within a space that encourages that innovation.
Hmm.
And we're definitely seeing the benefits in some of our clients as
Hmm.
well. And I just think that those programs aren't always things that people are aware of and don't
Mm.
know that they can access. And that's part of our role as well at TribalScale, is to help them really understand what's available out there and really see those benefits um, without the financial weight of
Hmm.
having to get it right the first time, or not just having to get it right the first time, but trying something new while doing it incrementally,
Yes.
which I think could also be critical for a number of manufacturers and across the different industries.
That is a great point. You know, by my admission, due to my role, and my career so far, I haven't been in the, should I say, executive position to be aware of the financial de-risking, you know, up to the level where the organization is able to secure government support. But that does sound like a very good approach, especially for SMEs. I do know that the Canadian government is very pro digital transformation, and in my own little community, I know that there are funds out there for entrepreneurs of certain uh, capacities for them to access in order to digitally transform. So, yes, um, that's a great point.
Yeah, no, I think that that's really good outlook, and
Yeah.
obviously your perspective, being in the industry, understanding it, and also industries that have really high standards,
Hmm.
pharmaceutical, food.
Yes.
I think that kind of raises the understanding as well that digital transformation can really happen at all levels within manufacturing. It's
Hmm.
required. Um, are there any difficulties with digital transformation? When you have really regulated industries like food and pharmaceuticals that are unique to those, which maybe other industries should just be aware of to really enhance the success of their projects. What kind of insight can you share about anything like that?
Yes, AI is relatively novel. So uh, I know that a lot of organizations, a lot of organizations do not have the right or a 360 perspective on how to set guardrails yet, because AI is applicable across different um, you know areas of expertise, and all of these expertise would also have their regulations, which would have to be factored into guardrails. For pharma, for example, I know that work is still being done to incorporate regulations and have these factored into AI deployments, but there is no standard, um, there's no industry gold standard for AI deployments, which makes it a little tricky. So far, what is what is being what is at the forefront of consideration is responsible AI, which is the use of patient data, for example, or the use of scientific data um, in AI deployments, right? Is it being used responsibly? Are we setting limits to how these are being used? However, from a regulation standpoint, there are no defined regulations yet, which is why a lot of pharmaceutical companies in their implementation of AI use cases try not to apply it directly to, um, or they make sure that it is at least auditable. They can audit, there are audit trails available in those deployments. So, who is using it, where it's being used, how it's being used, um, but they don't allow it to determine what regulations to apply onto their products or in the distribution of their products. It looks like a thin line. I'm not sure if you completely follow, but let me attempt to explain this again, right? So AI and ML for now is limited to the production floor, the use of raw materials, the use of equipment, throughput, and meeting internal company strategic goals. There's also a huge consideration for audit trails, right? You need to be able to store logs of what is being tracked, who is tracking, how it's being tracked, where it's being tracked, and what decisions are being made. However, for the prescription of the application of regulation, because in the day-to-day functioning of pharmaceutical industries, regulations have to always be put into consideration, and there are legal teams assigned for that, right? So for the right for AI to sort of suggest the right regulation is a bit tough right now. You know, there's still a huge need for human involvement in that regard, or human involvement in setting guardrails for the provisioning of regulation, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so
So
huge focus on audit trails and tracking who, what, where, when, but in defining the application of regulations, AI is not necessarily, because again, we have issues like hallucination, um, and just making sure you're using the right model and the right data set. So all of that still needs to be understood. Hopefully, we make advancements this year in that regard, but I don't think I can tell you specifically what role AI plays at this time.
Yeah, no, of course.
Yeah,
And I think that's very insightful.
yeah,
It's okay to understand that we don't always have all the answers.
yeah,
With things like this that are always changing,
hmm,
that's always going to be a component of that change,
yeah,
right? There's always a learning curve that needs to happen. Um, you need time to really occur before you can go back and look at what was the proper way of doing things as well, in that sense.
and allow me to also share some perspective. So, in heavily regulated functions in pharma, like quality, like the quality department, for example, I know that AI provides SOPs or guidelines or whatever the even for packaging. Um, so AI does provide these things. What AI does is that it significantly reduces the um, level of human involvement for these procedures or for these recommendations to be applied. However, there still need to be a human involvement for validation. So, okay, AI was able to help provide these so and so SOPs 100 times. You know, every 10 recommendations would have to be validated by humans, right? Instead of the 100 recommendations to be provided by humans, which would still have to be validated, if that makes any sense, right? So,
Yeah, of course.
yeah, so there will still, even if there are AI applications for regulation, because of the sensitive nature of this topic, there will still be need for at least one person who is a subject matter expert that validates these things.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
No, I think that
I
makes
probably
lots of
should have
sense.
started with that.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah,
As long as you get to
yeah,
the same conclusion as
yeah.
well. Um, Trick question for you. When do companies know that their digital transformation is complete?
That's a good question. um, I would say you only know when your goals are met.
Right.
I don't think it's ever complete. You only set goals, you meet those goals, and you set new goals. Because technology evolves, there will always be better ways to do things. Um, Technology that is not accepted today or that is not regulated today will eventually become accepted tomorrow, become regulated, and become okay to use, right? And it will be because it makes life easier, either via ways of working or productivity or operational efficiency. So you can only set your 5-year goal, meet those goals, and then by year 5 you say how much money have we saved? Does it justify the investment? Do we have enough to invest into another state of the art technology that makes life even better for us and make us even more competitive? Or do we have to wait another 2 3 years before we do that? So it depends on your goals, your ROI as at achieving those goals, and then the investment available for you to go to the next level. There will always be a next level. Yeah,
Yeah. So it's a continual
it's a
process.
continual process.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which really is
yeah,
almost everything in the world
everything.
now.
Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely.
why shouldn't manufacturing companies kind of fall into that category as well?
Yeah,
Um, so Wally, you've been in this industry for a while.
yeah.
What timeline or piece of technology has really made you say like, wow, like this is actually really a game changer, and why?
What piece of technology? I would say some people might find this really basic, but I think it really sets the foundation for the manufacturing industry to move on with the times. So I would say manufacturing execution systems, MES, right? MES and their ability to sense the most minute characteristics, temperature, uh, you know, volume, viscosity, flow, whatever it is, their ability to sense and collect that data and store that data onto cloud. Okay, now cloud is another huge competitor, you know. So it's between MES and cloud, because also cloud has helped a lot of industry, even down to small businesses, even pre-seed businesses, to save up on what would have been tens or hundreds of thousands or even millions in on-premise investments that probably may not even work out, right? Cloud has allowed for experimentation at no cost. I can say this because I have startups and we've leveraged free tier S3s, we've leveraged free EC2 instances, we've leveraged free, you know, uh, databases, free analytics, etc., all on the cloud without having to buy physical servers or um, employ, you know, physical technical people to do these things for us.
And the cost to run and store those servers as
Exactly.
well.
The
Yep.
the cost to run, store, and maintain those things, right? So MES for the collection of data, cloud for the storage and processing of these data, because this data is what helps AI to do what it does and improve decision making. And even without AI, with the collection of data, even if it's with a spreadsheet that you're collecting this data, you're still able to make informed decision. So
Yeah.
yeah,
No, it's incredible. Thank you, Wally. I think maybe one of the last things to take away from this, I know we've had a chance to pick your brain quite a bit about this,
yeah.
and hopefully our viewers have learned a lot, and I'm sure there'll be questions. But what's one piece of advice for manufacturers in North America who are looking to start their digital transformation that you can leave them with?
Piece of advice would be to digitize everything, even if you cannot afford state of the art technology. As long as you're collecting, you've digitized the collection of data and the storage of data. The sky's the limit, right? So, and also make sure your processes are not a cake. So, your processes allow for digitization, right? It's very important. It enables transparency. It makes decision making easier. This is especially a problem in the food industry. Um, from my experience, the food industry is very reluctant to invest in digitization um, because you know the margins are relatively small, and also the time it takes to change maybe you know a little too much for them to fathom, but it's always worth the investment. As someone who has been a quality assurance manager in the past, clients that have no issues with audits with the CFIA or with decision making are clients that have, to a large extent, digitized the collection of data, the approval of data or batch records either via um, QMS or ERP systems, some form of digitization and digital data collection. Um, will help you to get to the promised land, especially with AI. You know, and organizations they have no choice but to take AI seriously, because AI will make the most talented people want to work for you.
Yeah.
Generative AI, especially, um, even with something as small as Copilot use cases in your organization, will help um, employees to work better, to work easier. Um, you have generative AI installed in your tablets that your operators can, simply ask how things are being done. It generates a procedure. They do it right away. The data is collected. It's the collection is digitized. All very seamless. It saves you time. You attract the best talent. You make the best decisions. you end up with the best margins, etc. So please digitize everything. Yeah.
Oh, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Wally. I really
No,
appreciate the time.
thank you.
It's been very insightful. I've had a great time learning and listening to you. I'm sure our viewers will as well.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there'll be more questions down the road. So thank you. We'd love
Yeah,
to have
no,
you again
I can't wait.
and share this information with those who are learning. And we'd really love to get involved with digital transformation.
Thank you for having me, Jeremy.
Perfect. All right.
Okay.
We'll end with that. It's an hour and 16. Wow.